lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do.
Meanwhile, Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial.
How long will it be that countries keep experiencing these climate impacts before someone gets desperate and says, hey, we need to cool the planet with solar geoengineering?
It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth. Back in 1991, Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines. It was the largest eruption to affect a densely populated area, creating avalanches and giant mud flows that left more than 700 dead and 30,000 homeless. It also spewed a cloud of 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide particles into the stratosphere. That chemical cloud was hundreds of miles across and reflected about 2% of sunlight back to space. And in 1992, the Earth was cooler than in 1991.
That is part of the mechanism, but you do this in a controlled way.
Please welcome David Keith. Okay, all right. Now you got a little book here called "A Case for Climate Engineering." How will we save the planet?
You could actually spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up in a kind of ugly tech fix.
You can spray something into the atmosphere to change.
Spray pollution into the atmosphere to stop it warming.
So in the end, pollution saved them all. How does it work? How many planes are we talking about here? How do you do this?
You'd put, say, 20,000 tons of sulfuric acid into the stratosphere every year, and each year you have to put a little more. And this doesn't, in the long run, mean that you can forget about cutting emissions. We will need to rein in emissions.
No, we'll get to it eventually, yeah.
But it does.
But in the meantime, we're shrouding the Earth in sulfuric acid.
So people are terrified about talking about this because they're scared that it will prevent us cutting emissions.
Right, and also that it's sulfuric acid. I think you're bearing the lead. Is there any possible way this could come back to bite us in the ass?
We put 50 million tons of sulfuric acid in the air now as pollution, and it kills 1 million people a year worldwide.
Okay, and that's good or bad?
It's terrible.
But it'll be better if we put more in.
We're talking about 1% of that, a tiny fraction of that. So we should reduce that sulfuric acid
So if it
pollution.
kills 1 million people and we're only
bad.
doing 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
Okay.
But that's, so killing people is not the objective here.
Killing people, not the objective. I just wanted to be clear.
Actually slowing climate change.
Hello, everybody. Very wonderful to have you joining us today. We have a very different episode than we've had thus far. Most of the podcasts, we've been talking about Bitcoin. We've been talking about the carnivore diet. But all this time, we've had this sort of growing feeling of how we just cannot trust anything we hear from the government, from the media. It's practically always nonsense. And today we have a new topic that, if you've been following me on Nostr or Twitter lately, you know I've just been blaring the megaphones on this because I've been going down the rabbit hole. And I have with me today a gentleman by the name of Matt Landman. And he is going to talk to us about something called geoengineering. And why don't we just start off, Matt, by hearing a little bit about you, where you came from, how you got into this world of just exploring these interesting rabbit holes about the weather and weather modification. And, you know, actually, I have an even better idea. Before we start diving into that, I want to start with a phrase that a lot of us hear, conspiracy theory. What is this phrase, conspiracy theory? Where did it come from?
Well, that's interesting, and when you're down the rabbit holes, and thank you for the great for having me, for the introduction, and for the conversation and everything. And it's really nice to get to be heard by different types of people, different demographics. So for the listeners, please listen. Thank you. I'm just kidding, but yeah, it'll be worth it. The word. So the thing is our vernacular, our vocabulary, the English language. Unfortunately, it's been kind of hijacked. If you get deep into it, like if you study the Rastas, and they don't even say the word dedicate, they say livicate, because they don't want to put the word dead on the beginning of the word they have for commitment. And they say I and I, because synonyms are hijacked, and you means a female sheep, so they don't even say the word YOU because it's EWE and all these things, because words are very powerful. We're very powerful beings, and that's a whole spiritual rabbit hole as well, or not even rabbit hole, reality. Our words are very powerful. And anyways, so during the JFK assassination, I could just go down that path, right? So during the JFK assassination, which if you look into that one, it seems like there was a conspiracy. There was foul play. Right? It wasn't just a lone gunman situation. The official narrative seemed to be faulty. It had holes. So at that time, the CIA, J. Edgar Hoover, the U.S. government, our government, coined the phrase conspiracy theorist to demonize those that were thinking that the official narrative in the JFK assassination could have holes. So they're like, wait a second, there's going to be people thinking outside of the box on this one because it's quite obvious. It's like JFK's head went all these directions and they weren't guarding them properly. They didn't. I mean, that's another story. There's all these things we could go and like the show lasts all day. So it's like, everybody please do your due diligence. And it's important to and this is a refinement process, and trusting your gut and finding your intuition and your instincts and everything, because you'll look it up and the first searches will say, of course, that the official narrative is truth, and you have to really find and ask around and find the right documentaries and what have you, but they're out there, right? Like at 9/11, I like the movie Loose Change, but even if you can get the first version of it, but like Loose Change, and then that's another rabbit hole. But
for me, Zeitgeist was one that really
Zeitgeist
got me thinking.
Great. Yeah, Zeitgeist is fantastic. Me as well. It went Loose Change and then Zeitgeist, and who would have known that I was going to go back to film school and end up making a documentary? I never even thought I would be that guy. But those were really pivotal in my experience as well. Zeitgeist. But what's funny is I went back and started rewatching Zeitgeist because I wanted to show my ex-girlfriend, and there's a lot of things in there that I don't agree with, and I'm like, oh wow! But it did open my eyes.
It teaches you to start thinking critically. I think that's the point of these. But it at least gets you to start asking questions and think, oh, there are definitely some inconsistencies here that just don't make sense. And then it just pushes you into just more of a mindset of first principles thinking, and not just accepting everything that you're spoon fed by the TV, which is everything.
Right. And let's give it its own credit that these films, when they came out, they're engaging with the consciousness at the level that it's at that time. And they're also a part of that consciousness at that time. I took a class when I was getting my master's degree. I took a class that was like psychology, and it actually, half the class was on othering, this concept of othering. And it's like, if you can create this other that's not you, it's like, I'm a human and they're the other. You can you can consent to atrocities, like literal atrocities. It's like the othering puts these people in this other category, right? I welcome people to look up what othering means, but it's like where racism can or anything can breed. It's like, if I was to say that I'm, which I'm not a devout Christian, but imagine I was like, I'm a white male devout Christian, and people that are not in my little circle, they can all burn in hell and send them to the concentration camps and all sorts of whatever. It's a slippery slope, but it's like this othering, like I'm heterosexual and you're this. It's like everything is a divide and conquer strategy. And it starts in the playground with peer ridicule, like this peer ridicule bullying is othering too. You're not part of us, so we're going to make fun of you and you're going to get ostracized. So you better think like us, act like us, get in line and bah like a sheep like us. Cause it's like, come on, it's pretty sad. So the conspiracy theorist word, perfect for dismantling potential truthers and the peer ridicule psychology and the othering techniques and all of it. And it's reinforced by the media over and over. We're talking decades now. I mean, it'll be a century eventually. It'll be like, it's unreal. And it's still used constantly to gaslight people and say, oh, and now with geoengineering, chemtrails, whatever word you want to give it, we can talk about that. It's important because one word is demonized. One word is like science and good and going to save us from climate change and whatever. And it's back to the verbiage. It's like, oh, you're a chemtrail believer. It's like, and then at the same time, they're like, yo, solar geoengineering is going to save us from global warming. It's like, okay, how down the lie of lies are you lying? So, but anyways, it's genius what they did with the word conspiracy theorist. And what they've even done at this point, which is the ultimate psychological warfare, psyop, gaslighting, is they've come out and said that geoengineering is going to be our savior to save us from sea level rises and global warming and all these problems that aren't really actually true. We can talk about that. But it's in fear through this problem reaction solution Hegelian dialectic where they're coming and saying, you better be afraid, we have a problem. And they're showing you literal photo of a grid sky of chemtrails and like, this is geoengineering. This is going to be in the future. And we're going to dim the sun a little bit to save you from that evil sun. Because, the media has been demonizing the sun over and over, which is actually really good for you. You know what I mean? It's like sun is life. Don't even get me going on that one. So at the exact same time, simultaneously, the media, like literally a day apart, the same, like USA Today, Washington Post, New York Times, whoever they are, all of them in conjunction with one another because they're all owned by the same people nowadays, which is crazy too. Like literally, they've all been bought and they all are owned by the same families that pull these strings. Everyone's a puppet now. It's like your trusted news source no longer exists. But at the same time, they will show you the same photo of the grid sky, and they'll say, crazy conspiracy theorists believe that chemtrails are real. And then they'll tell you some psycho stuff about these crazy conspiracy theorists that think that that chemtrails are being sprayed and poisoning the people, and the government is out to get you, and then they'll lump them in a box with some other this, and then they're all othered into this, oh, they are believers of XYZ and this, and I don't believe that, and they're not me, and they should be ostracized, and they're this little minority, and I can't think like them. Whereas geoengineering and chemtrails were synonyms. They're like the exact same thing. But they are just in the UK, they call it taking the piss. It's like literally they're just taking the piss, and people are like, oh yeah, whatever you say. And then I'll end my rant with this. There's a quote that I like. You can take truth as authority, or you can take authority as truth. The choice is yours, right? And me personally, I'll take truth any day because, I'm not just going to be told how to think and feel by some authority source, Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so fascinating as we go down these rabbit holes to look in our past and think back to what we were believing at certain points of our lives and try to put the pieces together of like, wait, why was I so confident about this thing being true or not true? And it's like the movie Inception where they're going into people's brains and trying to plant the seed, right? So like people think that they came up with this idea. So it's really deeply ossified in their brain. They don't know that it was given to them by an outside force. And that's what's happened to all of us, like just, a year ago, I would have completely said, oh, of course chemtrails are crazy. Like that's, yes, I know the government is poisoning the water supply and the food and the soil, but they wouldn't do that. Like, yeah, come on. I mean, that's just too much. And we're just so conditioned, you know. I told you before we started recording, I'm visiting my family right now, and bless their souls, they watch mainstream media news like every single night. So when I'm in the other room, like researching this stuff, it's kind of dystopia every time I take my headphones off and hear the news in the other room. And of course, I will occasionally just walk by and just listen. And they are constantly just pushing out conspiracy theory. They're using that terminology around things that, you know, are actually happening to just condition these viewers to not listen to it. And of course, now we have the whole election cycle, so there's just all kinds of noise everywhere. They're just like pumping and pumping and pumping. But it's just so pervasive. And I really credit another Bitcoin podcaster I respect a lot. His name is Daniel Prince. He has a Once Bitten podcast. He's been really talking about geoengineering a lot, and I trust that guy. This is a cool thing about having like a really good community of people that you trust, do the real research, and are looking into things at a first principles level. And that is, you know, the way the Bitcoiners are, from my experience. I've been in that world for a while. And so he starts coming out about this, and he's talking about it on Twitter. He's posting podcast episodes about it, and it starts making some sense. Like, dang, you know, the amount of time it's taking me to open my mind to something I once thought was crazy is just getting shorter and shorter. But the more of these rabbit holes I go down and realize that the exact opposite of what I always thought is actually the truth. I told you, you know, carnivore diet was one of them. Of course, fruits and vegetables are good for you. I've been told that my whole life. Well, I took them out and I got the healthiest I've ever been. People all over the world are just curing all of these illnesses they've had their whole lives and they thought they were stuck with forever. So this is just a new one. And geoengineering, like you said, it's like the bad C word. If you say that, people's brains just shut down. If you ever mention that, they are just so conditioned. And like I said, I used to be the same way, where if someone says chemtrails, they just think, oh, that's crazy. Of course, that's crazy. Like that's, you know, that's like the stereotypical crazy uncle in like the TV character on this funny TV show. The guy just can't stop talking about chemtrails. He's the crazy person. Everyone knows that. And so as I was just listening to these, you know, new ideas pop up of maybe there's some research to be done here. Maybe you should start actually looking into this yourself. Come on, Ben, you've done this a couple times. You learned you were wrong about some other things. And so I was in Nashville at the time, which was kind of funny because this is right around the time when Tennessee introduced that bill to ban geoengineering. And I saw that and just thought, you know, that's weird. Well, you can't ban something that isn't happening. What? So I started, you know, I was living in an Airbnb out in the suburbs, and every single morning and evening I would go up the hill and just sit on this grassy hill and just get some sun. Because like you said, I've gotten so big on just sunlight and the power of sunlight and just getting vitamin D. And I'm one of those weirdos that anytime I can, I'm taking all the clothes off. I'm getting full exposure, baby. And it just feels so good. And you can just feel yourself being infused with vitamins. So I would go up to this spot, and the more you care about the sun and start thinking about the sun, the more you start looking into the sky. It's kind of a natural thing to do. You start looking up and just, you know, paying attention to the patterns you see up there. And as I'm listening to these podcasts and starting to watch some videos and movies, and I find Dane Wigington and I watch The Dimming, and you know, I'm also just seeing these streaks all over the sky and just thinking, well, the community notes on Twitter keeps telling me these are contrails. So how come I see them pop up in the morning, and 8 hours later I come back and there's just this smog over the sun in the exact spot that they were? And I started just watching them over hours. Like I can easily just lay in the grass and just watch the sky for hours. I love me time and just relaxing. So I would go out there, and I love writing. So I would, you know, just bring my laptop in airplane mode on the notepad and just be writing up blog posts and just watching the sky. And these huge lines that would just pop up behind these planes would just be crossing all over the place. Every single day, they just ended up with this big smog over the sun. And it kind of pissed me off because I want to get my sunbathing in. So at first I'm just like, there's something weird about this. This doesn't make sense. Continue learning, continue digging down the rabbit hole, continue finding more and more people who are talking about this, and they just keep making more and more sense. I find your work, your movie FRANKENSKIES, which I'll be sure to put in the show notes. That's, you know, one of your biggest creations, which was super monumental for me. I really appreciate you making that, and so many other people out there. And one of the reasons why I love your movie is because there's no opinions in there. It's similar to, you know, the huge 9/11 portion of Zeitgeist, where it's literally just like clips of, you know, from the news and from the media and from like actual things that have happened. You're not coming in and saying, and this is what happened here, and this is, you know, you're not like injecting anything. This is just reality laid out on a timeline. And this is one of the things I'd love to talk about with you today, is just the general timeline of events that have happened throughout history that led up to this moment. And I think that is really a good way to introduce people to the story, because like you said, this has been a very long, meticulous process of sort of massaging people's brains in such a way that, you know, it's there's so much confusion around it. You know, one day, like you said, they're saying, oh, chemtrails are a crazy conspiracy theory. If you say that, you're crazy. And then the next day they're talking about, they're having Bill Gates on CNBC saying, oh, yeah, you know, we have this thing. We're able to spray aerosols in the sky, and it might help us block out the sun because the sun is very bad. And there's literally segments on this that you could, if you go on YouTube, I was just doing this last night. If you look up, you know, aerosol sprays, stratospheric aerosol injection, geoengineering, they have all these fancy words for it, like you said, the sciencey words. Those are all over the place. You can see all of those. And of course, they have a little banner under the video that, you know, takes you to the official source saying, you know, this is totally fine and not a conspiracy theory. But it's such a, this is like the rabbit hole of all rabbit holes here, because pretty much everyone has been paying attention. I can use that as an example. I spend a lot of time on social media. I do it for work. I do it for my job. So I think everyone out there who has been following social media for a while has seen these headlines pop up about how Bill Gates has, you know, he's investing in this startup to block out the sun. And for me personally, I think everyone, most of the time, they just see that and they're just thinking like, oh, that crazy Bill, you know, what's he up to today? Just doing these crazy things, investing. Of course, that's never going to actually happen, right? Like, I mean, they wouldn't let him do that. That's crazy. Spraying chemicals and aluminum into the sky. No, they wouldn't do that. I mean, that's obviously crazy. Well, here we are. And do you think they'd really ask our permission? Is the question people should be asking. Like, would they really ask you little peasant, if you care about your air being filled with chemicals and poison? Whole bunch of crazy things there. Just had to get that off my chest, because this is my first time talking about this on a podcast. So I'm really it's been pent up for a while, Matt. So why don't we do a little bit of, I'm sorry, I totally skipped over in the very beginning, your story, a little bit of your story. Why don't we hear about your story and how you got into this? Just some background for you as well.
Thanks, Ben. And thanks for your authenticity and your heart and your story. And I loved all that. That was all really great. And I want you to be able to rant some more about this.
We've got all kinds of time.
Yeah,
more ready.
I love it. So one thing, before I talk about my story, which I'd love to tell a little bit about myself, because it gives it a personal bit that I'm a person, human. For one, you talked about just like laying out in the sky and looking up. Like, I've made buttons that say, look up and wake up. Look up, wake up. Because really, if you just start looking up with a discerning eye, you don't need nobody to tell you jack. You don't need my documentary. You don't need anything except for your own eyes and your own intuition and gut and instincts and like just logic. You know, you go and ask Google what to think, or Siri or Alexa or freaking whoever, they're going to tell you how to think. But if you want to think for yourself, it's very much right there. One thing is when you start seeing all those planes doing all that stuff in your sky, they engage and interact with one another. That's what starts to be like, wait, like they'll be going in each other's wakes, filling in the gaps. Like some will have a short trail going side by side with a long trail, or like they're interacting with each other to fill in the blue to make it all hazed out. It's like, it's not just regular air traffic if you look at it right. But all of that's kind of like in a weird frequency. It's kind of like, come into my conspiracy world, down my rabbit hole. It's a little bit fear-based and dark, especially for like new people or your grandmother or whatever. And it's like, it's important to meet people where they're at when you're talking about things like this. So I love talking about the irregular pattern of appearance and those beautiful blue skies that we still have in between. So we got those blue skies with no air traffic, guys, or some planes going by with nothing going on, or maybe they'll have this short trail, which those are actually primer gases. They'll prime the sky with shorter trails and what have you. So the engines, these things are not blasting out heat. They were back in like the 60s, but now they have these high bypass turbofan jet engines. They're just like a propeller creating lift over a wing. It's not blasting hot air. On the back of like an F-16 is pushing the plane. It's a little different story, but these regular commercial aircraft, they're not blasting hot air. They shouldn't have these, but just like you're like, well, but I'm not an aeronautical engineer. How can I trust that? Just look at those blue days. Focus on that and be like, wait, well, how come one day I see one plane and it's a nice, beautiful blue sky and I hardly see any air traffic, but then on some other days, they're zigzagging and they seem to be engaging with one another, filling in all the gaps to block my sun. So that's an interesting tidbit. You mentioned Mr. Bill Gates and his whole sun dimming thing. I'm going to do this a little backwards and tell about one of my successes and then rewind to how I became an activist. But in 2018, when I was like really going, I was doing my third global chemtrail summit, and I just had come out with the movie in 2017. I moved to Arizona because there was to be a sun dimming experiment out of Bill Gates and his little minion, David W. Keith, out of Calgary, Harvard University professor, this guy, David Keith. And he's publicly says, I get my funding from Bill Gates. And he's like the sun dimming guy, you know, the solar geoengineering guy. Like he's all over the media. He's like the puppet. And he's not getting funding from Bill Gates, Melinda Gates Foundation. It's literally from Bill Gates, because Bill Gates really wants to dim the sun. It's like, okay, guy. It's like, all right, Bill Gates wants to dim the sun. So they were going to do this experiment through this company, Worldview Enterprises, with these high-tech balloons, which is actually really creepy. These high-tech balloons want to go up really high and then be tethered to one another and have these payloads that spray for like a month, just constantly releasing nanoparticulate aluminum. It's like silly, and then dim the skies that way. So I think that as geoengineering advances, it won't just be coming out of planes. It's going to get weird and more dystopian.
I just saw a video last night, sorry to interrupt, but there was this geoengineering experiment that was, again, just like a totally, public news segment of they're talking about this. It's basically just this little tower with like posts sticking out of it that's just like pumping, those particulates out there. And they're just having this fun little news segment about, like there's this cool new weather modification tool so you can actually buy more rain. How cool is that?
We're here in Santa Barbara County, home to one of the longest running cloud seeding operations in the country. We've got some ground-based cloud seeding equipment right here, and we're going to get to hear all about how it works and see it in action. Let's check it out. Cloud seeding is the most common type of weather modification, and it has many different techniques and applications. Today, it's mostly used to increase rain and snowfall, reduce the size of hail, and reduce fog at airports.
Traditionally, cloud seeding has been done from the air. So airplanes have had racks on them where these same flares are positioned on the airplane, and the airplane flies into the storm. So in order to reduce the cost to the client and reduce our carbon footprint, we've been able to station these on the ground.
If you have enough money, you can go to websites and order weather. You can make it not rain on your wedding day. For about $500 grand, you can guarantee clear blue skies on your wedding day. So it's like, this is a thing. But I moved to Sedona, Arizona, and then in Tucson, Arizona in May 2018, I had a protest on Mother's Day for Mother Earth, I hosted a conference, packed the house at the University of Arizona, which has a geoengineering master's program. So it's like the heart of the beast. And then we had a conference, a concert, protest, and the entire city found out. Actually, I advertised like crazy and put flyers up and everything and did all this grassroots stuff and everything. I did everything I possibly could. But the city learned, not everyone's willing to admit that the chemtrails are ongoing, are already happening. But everyone was against the sun dimming experiment. They had 2 variable sizes of nanoparticulate aluminum that they were going to experiment with because they thought aluminum would float really well to dim the sun. And they're going to do it in the summer when Tucson's like 115 degrees. They would have knocked it down to like 90 and then the whole world would have been like, yeah, and the media would have ran with it, right? And we stopped them. It was a huge success. They put their experiment on hiatus. And then finally this year, they did a secret one out of Alameda, California, on an aircraft carrier, and they let just the New York Times come watch them do cloud whitening experiment, where off the aircraft carrier they just pumped fake clouds into the sky and cooled it down. But yeah, so anyways, hi everyone. My name is Matt. I'm Matt Landman. What I really want to stress here is I'm a semi-normal like person. Like I grew up in Virginia, Northern Virginia, Herndon it is. My landline is going to be ringing for a second. Sorry. Okay, so then I grew up in Virginia, and I went to Virginia Tech and got a degree in business. And then I was like totally opposite of who I am now, right? So I would make fun of hippies, make fun of tree huggers and crystals. I would never even touch a crystal. I definitely sagged my pants, listened to hip hop, drank 40s, smoked Newport Lights. I was like, I had such a beer belly that people would make fun of me and ask me when the baby was due, because I drank a lot of beer, which I don't drink anymore at all. Like I'm just like, I had vicious heartburn, and I was really unhealthy, and just like a normal, like watched football, went to the football games, and yeah. So anyways, somebody told me during 9/11, I just happened to be back living at home because I transferred to George Mason, went to another university. I was living in the DC area during 9/11, really close to Dulles Airport where they hijacked some planes and whatever went down, and I was immersed in it. My girlfriend at the time was going to Pace University, which is right next to the Twin Towers in Manhattan. And I couldn't get a hold of her all day. And I was like semi involved there. I was born in 1980. So then I was almost 21, right? So I was like an adult. Like some of these people nowadays, you can't really blame them. Like kids that weren't even alive during 9/11. It's like, it was a conspiracy. It's like, okay, I look it up on the internet. I see 2 sides. Like I'm not like, they have no motivation or reason to really dig down that rabbit hole. But it's like, if you get going on it, it's like, holy geez, the government is evil. It's like, it's a big eye opener, but a lot of people don't have time and energy. So I recommend getting your hands on the movie Loose Change, whatever. So I thought that the official narrative was true during all that. And somewhere in there, a couple years or maybe a year after, somewhere in there in my life, I was a waiter with a college degree. I got a Virginia Tech degree in business and I ended up waiting tables. And my friend that was also a waiter, just shared with me the movie Loose Change. It opened up my eyes a little bit. Someone else then shared with me the movie Zeitgeist. And in that whole whirlwind, I ended up moving to California because I wanted to get out of where I was living. I wanted to do something different. I always had like this travel bug, and I wanted to actually go to film school eventually. That was like a dream. Never thought it would be for documentaries or anything. Thought I was going to be like a, movie star or something, So I moved to LA, and I'm from the East Coast. I moved to LA, and I thought it was going to be like New York. I'd never been. It was a nightmare. I hated it. I moved to San Diego. And then I ended up actually driving back home cross country and moving. Grass is always greener. Moving back to Virginia, moving back to San Diego. I did that like 11 times. So I've done the cross country trip like 11 times. Like zip, 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 different routes. Getting to know the United States, which is a beautiful place. A lot of national parks. And if you don't know the United States, get to know it. It's beautiful. So just saying. like Bryce Canyon and Zion, like these things, Yosemite, Yellowstone, freaking amazing places that we have in this country. Like everyone wants to go everywhere else, but it's like also get a passport and go everywhere else. So I recommend. But so anyways, I ended up finally living in Northern California, going back to school. I went to Cal State Humboldt because there I could continue getting student loans and get a master's degree in business and also couple that with a film degree and like do both because I wanted to get experience in film and I didn't have any, money, but I wanted to like get another degree and get, whatever for student loans, whatever, become famous, whatever it was, my motivations. Like I was always pretty creative and into photography too. So I got a master's degree in business administration with a focus in sustainability, which now sustainability is like a dirty word. Don't mind me. And then I almost got a film degree. I got like a film minor and I learned 60 millimeter film, like actual real film making and was hanging out with film students and stuff. I ended up working, this is getting a little boring, but I'm almost done. So then I ended up working in finance after with the master's degree. And it was like super lame and corrupt. And I was just like, this is horrible. And I was like selling my soul. I'd gone through more education just to work in an office again. And it was like, whatever. I counted one day on a Greyhound. I've had like 40 different jobs. And then finally I got offered to work a job on an organic farm. And I took it. It was a huge pay cut. But I was like, for the first time in my life, I was like getting really, really fit. I got so in shape and ripped, really. And you wouldn't imagine what the human body can do if you're working 1 year on a farm, like unreal. And so I got grounded. And my last name is Landman, like Landman. So like literally, I need to be working on a farm eventually in my life. So I worked on an organic farm, and I learned day one that I know nothing. Like day one on this farm, because it was Warren Creek Organic Farms in Arcata, California. I couldn't imagine all the things that I didn't know. Like there's so many varieties of this and that and this and this. So I'll pause on the farm. So when I was really unhealthy, a friend's sister said to me, "Wow, you have really bad heartburn. What about your diet?" And I was like, "Diet?" She's like, "Yeah, the stuff you eat." And I was like, "Yeah." What about it? She's like, "Oh, what do you like?" I eat everything, I said, And she's like, "Well, I look at the ingredients on food, like when you buy it at the store." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, I'm in my freaking 20s. I've got a college degree. I'm like, "What do you mean ingredients?" Right? She's like, "Yeah, you flip it over and read the back. There's ingredients. They have to list what they're feeding, what they're selling you." I was like, "Oh, no way!" Like, and I'll take it because it's from my friend's older sister, and she was cute, right? I was like, "Okay, Jasmine, yeah, right, sure. I'll read the ingredients." And she goes, "Yeah, if I can't read it, I don't eat it." Changed my whole life. It's like why I'm an activist. I stopped like eating certain things. I was like, "Whoa, this is like an abbreviation: EBTA, DDZY, number 17, color this." And I was like, "Wait a second." You look it up, and it's like could be carcinogenic. It's like, wait, is this what's giving me heartburn? Like I literally started to question everything. Just because she said that, I like eventually went and got healthy and everything. But so anyways, I'm working on this organic farm. Fast forward another decade of just life. I'm working on this organic farm in Northern California. Day one, I learned potatoes grow potatoes. Okay. I didn't know this. This is horrible that I didn't know this. I literally have bought potatoes, watched them try to grow in my cupboard, and in the dark with the little sprouts in the eyes. Lo and behold, if you would put that in the ground, it would make a whole network of potatoes under the ground. Like they should be free. They're so abundant. And like I watched this documentary about the botany of desire. Highly recommend. It goes through these different plants and how humans have engaged with them and made them evolve in different ways. Talks about cannabis, tulips, potatoes, and apples, which apples is amazing. I can't believe you can't, like, you get an apple, you get the seed, you can't grow the apple from that seed. It's amazing, the whole story. But potatoes, they were always totally poisonous and would kill people. But the Incans, they realized that the potato was so abundant, it could grow so well that they just bred out the poison through selective breeding, which is a whole cool thing. which, by the way,
I've talked a lot about that on this show, just how we've actually manipulated all these, plants to be edible, because they used to all be poisonous and just basically kill us, and they were super bitter, but we've selectively breeded them over, thousands of years now to where they're just these delicious sugar bombs. And that's a crazy rap. I'm not sure I haven't seen that movie you mentioned, but I'd be curious to check it out. But yeah, I mean, just how plants have changed over the millennia is super fascinating.
Yeah, and it's unreal, how few people know that there's so many varietals. Like, I had to move to California to learn that there's more than one type of lemon. Like, there's probably thousands. I mean, there's so many different varieties of everything. Like it's kind of a mind blower if you really think about it. And apples, I watched that documentary and I was like, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of types of apples, not just like 4. You know what I mean? And that alone started making me think. So I'm working on this organic farm, and I'm like wondering if I even want to move back to Virginia again for like the 12th time, And I'm like, what, at the end of the season, I'm like, what am I doing in my life? Because eventually they're going to lay people off in the winter and whatever. It's a whole story. So I'm like talking to my friend back home, right? And I'm like, bro, like my friends here, they're all college students. They don't know anything. They don't even know about 9/11. I think I want to get out of here. I came up here just to get my master's degree, and I've been here for like 5 years instead of 2. Like, I ended up being there for like a decade. It's crazy. So anyways, the Pacific Northwest is just beautiful, and it really can draw you in, as you know. So he says to me, yeah, man, they don't know about 9/11, Matt. Cut them some slack. Like, some of them were like infants when it happened. They don't have any reason to go down that rabbit hole. But he says to me, but what about chemtrails? That's right in everyone's face. And I go, what's that? And he says, what, Matt? You showed me Loose Change and Zeitgeist and got me thinking, woke me up to 9/11, basically, And you don't know about chemtrails? This is the power of your voice, of planting the seed. This is how powerful you are at meeting people where you're at, or where they're at, and where you're at, but where they are at, and just planting the seed, you know what I mean? The best way you see fit. And then it can grow. In this instance, it grew into like, I totally changed my life, and I'm like an activist and made this movie and doing all these things. But, and FRANKENSKIES has been seen by like almost 100 million people. And it's like that seed was really huge. And he was like, Matt, you don't know about chemtrails. Just look up for one and go look it up on freaking Google or whatever, right? This is like 2013, right? I've thought about it. It's 2013. I thought about it the other day. And so I go home and start looking it up, and I'm like, what? What the fuck? And then every day I'm like looking at the sky, right? And then pretty much like right at the exact same time, it's early October, and we're in the midst of like a 4-year drought. Like, California has had this like rare drought, even Northern California, Pacific Northwest, where it usually is like this seasonal deluge from like mid-October to like April. It just rains. It's just like, that's usually how it was. And so I'm working on this farm, and they're like, hey, we're expecting a 1-week rainstorm, actually. And it's like, I'm living on the coast, and the frogs and salamanders from underneath my house came out for this rain. You could feel it coming. You could see the black clouds coming off the ocean. The Doppler radar, because my farmer guy had the Doppler, it's like, you can see it coming. It's like red. And it's 100% chance of rain for 1 week is the forecast, right? That was before they started like integrating the chemtrailer, because they like tell them what they're going to do now. So it's like partly cloudy, and then they come and spray, and it's like, oh, good job, guys. But anyways, I think like the weather apps got bought up, but anyways, that's another thing. So I'm like, okay, I got my rain boots on, and Farmer Paul's like, come out, we got to harvest pumpkins, right? It's like literally there's like squash in the field, and we don't want it all to get rained on, and they're going to rot. We're going to lose like a lot of crop because they're going to rot sitting in puddles. And so I'm out there working my butt off, harvesting squash, and this big storm cloud is rolling in. I'm like, I'm about to get drenched, and maybe they'll let me go home. I don't know. And literally where I worked on this farm, it was not near a huge airport or anything. There would be sparse air traffic. I looked every day after this, and it was like maybe you'd see a plane or two on a given day, really high, passing over. In this occurrence, there was like a dozen planes showed up on the edge of the storm. So this big storm's coming. It's going to be freaking epic and relieve the drought, and the soil's dry and all this stuff, right? Because potatoes you can grow dry farming. You don't even got to water them. Anyways, it's crazy stuff that you learn just working on a farm. It's like, how could we be so indoctrinated in the public school system to not know anatomy, farming, all these things, but like, wow, like to not be able to grow our own food. We eat food, remember? We eat every day. So anyways, sorry, that's a tangent. So I watched these planes come and zigzag the sky, leaving these persistent, linear, cirrus cloud formations out of the back of each plane. And they were making these X's and circles, blah, 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 all on the edge of the storm front. Okay? Then they all left. They showed up and left. It was statistically, it was like an anomaly, right? Like it was a very irregular pattern of appearance, how they showed up like that. And then the storm came and it dropped no rain. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? And I just kind of planted the memory and started to look into it. And really, it gave me this whole foundation to like go off of, because come to find out you can spray aluminum, and aluminum is the opposite of seeding clouds. It dissipates, makes it not rain. And I learned right then and there that there's some insanity going on in the sky and nobody knows. And so then I started like asking people, do you know about this? Do you know about this? And I made like some flyers and I did a little presentation and nobody cared. And I was blown away. What was really shocking is nobody knew about it. Nobody knew at all. Like they had no reference point at all. They're like, what are you crazy? And I was like, well, nobody knows about this. And so then at one point I was like, all right, I want to make a documentary that everyone can sink their teeth into. Because at that point there was stuff out there, but nothing that I was comfortable sending to my people back home, my friends and stuff like that, because there was just elements to the presentation that weren't logical. Like someone would like film like a dead bush and be like, it's the chemtrails, and it's like that is a corollary relationship and not causal. You can't just jump to a conclusion. I mean, it's just, you know, let's do a little more than that. Like, especially when you've got a very skeptical audience. It's like, come on, they've been indoctrinated. Like, sorry to say, we've all been indoctrinated and programmed to really other people in this circumstance. And what's really important is the media and everything. They say crazy conspiracy theorists think chemtrails are spraying poison on the people. But that's like, you know, maybe sometimes they do that. They'll spray lithium or manganese or whatever. But more so, it's weather engineering. It's control of the weather. It's control of the weather. They're making drought, making crazy rains, making floods, making hurricanes when they could put them out if they want. Like, look up how Bill Gates went around talking about how he could put out hurricanes if he wanted. It's like 12 years ago now. He's like, I got technology to put out hurricanes. But then he didn't. Does not. It's like they only get stronger when they get. So it's like when they get over here, you know? And it's like there's a hurricane atmospheric modification program that released black carbon soot from drones into the outer eye wall of Hurricane Katrina and making it stronger. It's like, did they know it was going to get stronger? Either way, they made it stronger. No one was told. So, so that answers that question. And then also FRANKENSKIES, which you asked about, it starts off in 1920s. Okay. And I didn't want to make a movie that was a narration, because it's like, then it's all about that person. I didn't even want to be in the movie. I did not want to be in the movie. Nicole, bless her, helped edit the movie. She's an amazing activist, and she'd never edited anything in her life. And she helped really make it what it is. And she put me in the movie in the end. And I'm like, whatever, fine.
Just but when like, you're on that radio show with Roddy, right?
I remember that part. I went, and then I went on this tangent in this like presentation that I gave in Portland, but a little bit after that. But I was just a little person in the movie, along with these other people in the movie. And so it starts off with all this chronological stuff, military stock footage, and all this from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And then once it gets to modern day, of course, it's interviews that I got in like 2015, 16, 17. And I interviewed Bill Vander Zalm, who is like a politician in Canada. He was a hero who rolled back this big tax in British Columbia. He was their premier, like the governor of California is the governor of British Columbia. Interviewed him and interviewed a bunch of people. It was really great. It's a great documentary. Everyone should watch it. But what's really important about it is there's a bunch that's really important, but one of the most important aspects is this sweeping under the rug of the knowledge of cloud seeding. So in the 1960s, the U.S. made it flood in Vietnam during the Vietnamese conflict, because I guess war was never really declared, so I can't really call it a war. But it's like we made it flood on the Ho Chi Minh Trail for years.
October 1966. The Vietnam War is in full swing. U.S. military scientists are devising a way to slow down enemy forces using the weather.
U.S. had gone from advisor status to in-field combat status, and were not doing well. As a result of not being able to make progress on the ground, the U.S. went to bringing the battle into the atmosphere above the battlefield.
The Air Force employed a groundbreaking military directive called Project Popeye.
Project Popeye was a weather modification program that involved cloud seeding, and the idea was to produce or exaggerate the monsoon rains that are traditional in that region.
Experiments are carried out beforehand with the military aircraft dropping silver iodide crystals in clouds over a strip of the Laos Panhandle, east of the Belovans Plateau in the Sekong River Valley. 50 cloud seeding runs are conducted. 82% of the clouds seeded produce rain within a brief period.
So Project Popeye then became Operation Popeye. It became a proper military program during the Vietnam War.
The goal of Operation Popeye was to extend the monsoon season and create an inordinate amount of rainfall by seeding clouds over the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail was the primary supply route by which the North Vietnamese Army really supplied its troops that were operating in combat forces operating in South Vietnam, as well as supplying the Viet Cong. So it was the most significant logistical center of gravity to the North Vietnamese, and it was an important strategic objective for the United States and our ally South Vietnam to try to interdict that supply line to cut off those supplies to the enemy.
Operation Popeye's objectives are to soften road surfaces on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, cause landslides along roadways, and wash out river crossings.
The military had their own catchphrase as a result of this program, and it was "Make mud, not war."
And then afterwards, the international community and the UN, they all came together and had to vote unanimously. They voted, I believe it was 54 countries to 0, that weather warfare is no longer allowed because it impacts everybody. You know, you make it rain here, it's going to be drought next door, and then this country got drought stricken. It's like they weren't even involved in that war, whatever, you know, stuff like that. So that was like common knowledge in the 60s that cloud seeding was a thing. In the 70s, I've got all these newspaper clippings. I mean, you know, what do you call it? Microfiche newspaper clippings and all that. Wow, microfiche, that's a word I haven't used in a long time. For those that don't know, the libraries used to have this like micro, you could look at all the old newspapers through this like kind of a computer screen, but they're all like these slides of the, anyways, they probably still exist. So these old newspapers from the 70s, they would talk about cloud seeding like it was common knowledge. Farmers, which this one blows my mind, farmers would even seed their own dry fields with nutrients. So it basically takes just nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK to grow food, and that's one reason why the soil is deplenished of all the essential minerals and things that we need. There's a lot of things that we need besides NPK, but it takes just basically NPK to grow the food, and it's a whole thing to learn about. But you can use one, like say your plants need potassium, you can shoot it up in the sky and make it rain freaking potassium. You can seed the clouds with your nutrients. And farmers were doing that, not just seeding clouds with rain, but seeding clouds with the nutrients that their plants needed. That's where they were going with it. And then come like the 80s, 90s, and modern day, that knowledge got just swept under the rug. The Canadian government in Alberta publicly did these campaigns to make the hail not big, because the hail was big and messing up crops. And they're like, all right, don't worry, we got it. We'll make the hail not big. We'll get rid of that hail for you. There was all like weather engineering, aka geoengineering, because that's like what it is messing with the, clouds and weather and all that sort of stuff. Geoengineering is not just the dimming the sun, but that's not what they're kind of trying to make it out to be. It's just like, we're going to dim the sun for you. You're welcome. And then when you bring that up to people, they're like Mr. Burns? It's like, not just like Mr. Burns. Like, oh, like the Matrix. It's like, no, not like the Matrix, but you've definitely been programmed pretty well by your mainstream stuff to think something else, and then to make fun of me and ridicule me and be like, oh, you think they're going to do it like the Matrix? Oh, it's just a movie, man. It's like, you've been programmed already. You been gotten to. So let's just take a step back and think about the programming for a minute. Wow, the tangents I can go on. So yeah, what do you think about all that?
I love it. Yeah, I mean, the timeline, like I mentioned to you earlier, is just the way that I think we need to focus on educating people about this, because this has been going on for so long. And like you said, something I just popped into my head as you were talking about how completely normal this was many decades ago. This wasn't like this taboo, crazy thing. But the word they used was cloud seeding. Is another one of these sciencey words. A good friend of mine, his father was an atmospheric scientist and was sent down to Chile to do cloud seeding. So, I mean, people I know were out doing this. They were part of these science experiments in the sky.
You resorts to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hydrological dams and plants do it. It's just like, it's like in the back page of the newspaper. Nobody really puts two and two. Like, what? Oh, they made snow at there. It's like they made snow also with their snowmaking machines, and they seeded the clouds as they came by, making snow in Vail or whatever. Colorado has a whole industry because they got to get snow on the ground to have their tourists come for the skiing, and they have a whole thing. It's just like, it's just not common knowledge. Keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And so while doing my research, just kind of preparing for this, I pulled out a handful of just timeline entries from a website, weathermodificationhistory.com. There's a bunch out there that basically just have the timeline similar to your movie, and some of these are in your movie. And so, if I may, I just rattle off a few of these just to give people an idea. 1841, James Pollard Espy, known as the Storm King, a U.S. meteorologist, proposed burning forest on the west coast of the USA to increase rainfall on the east coast. Espy developed a convection theory of storms, explaining it in 1836 before the American Philosophical Society, and in 1840 before the French Académie des Sciences and the British Royal Society. His theory was published in 1840 as the Philosophy of Storms. Fast forward, 1916. This is one I heard you talk about on a recent podcast. Charles Mallory Hatfield, the moisture accelerator. In the city of San Diego, which was suffering badly from drought, they made a deal with Hatfield to make it rain. He agreed and made it rain so hard that there was a flash flood causing millions of dollars in damages, destroying everyone's houses. And as a result, Hatfield was not paid, as this would imply fault on part of the city. So basically, they got this guy who had this technology. He was a mad scientist, and he just shot a bunch of sulfuric acid or silver iodide or one of those, like you said, there's different chemicals for different jobs here. This was the one that they wanted to make it rain, so they pumped that. Fast forward to 1947, Project Cirrus. This is another one in your movie. First hurricane cloud seeding experiment, where they're literally throwing this stuff into hurricanes. Oh, let's see what happens. What could go wrong? 1962, this is the classic Lyndon Johnson quote. He approves weather warfare. In his speech, he says,
"It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world."
This is 1962. President comes out and says, like, weather warfare, it's on, baby. We are officially in charge of the weather now. And this has just been completely forgotten. 1963, Project Storm Fury. More hurricane cloud seeding. 1971, this is the one you talked, or this is like 70s, late 60s, the Vietnam area, Operation Popeye. I've been to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, actually. I went to Vietnam when I was in college. I wasn't thinking about any of this stuff, of course, but I remember just looking at these museums, and they were all just so critical of the U.S. empire. And at the time, I didn't really understand why. Now I know why. They were literally using the weather to just wipe these people out. It's absolutely insane. 1999, HARP becomes fully operational. HAARP. That's something that people need to get acquainted with. And this has been in and out of the news all over the place because this is this crazy, just giant energy weapon thing that they have in Alaska. Maybe we could talk about that later. That's probably a good thing for people to have on their radar. 2008, Beijing Olympics. Chinese deployed 20 artillery and rocket launch sites across Beijing to shoot silver iodide into the clouds to flush out the rain before the Olympics, causing downpours and flooding. 2017, International Cloud Atlas releases its first update in 30 years, says, oh, guess what? We have 12 new cloud types.
We are back on a Saturday morning, and it is time to get your head into the clouds for a change.
That's because the International Cloud Atlas has released its first update in 30 years. Angel's over in the Orange Room with more on that. The International Cloud Atlas.
Yeah, guys. All right.
Talk about it every day.
Big day for me. Forget being on cloud 9. We are on cloud 12 because that's how many new types of clouds have been added to this historic update coming from meteorologists. I'm a little biased, right? Exciting stuff, guys. All right. So the new types include the Volatus or roll cloud, which has been designated as a whole new species. You can see it gets its name from this long horizontal tube-like shape. Next one up, we have the cavum, or the hole punch cloud. This big circular gap is sometimes caused by aircraft taking off and landing. Very easy to see, right? Makes sense there. And we also have the Spiritus. These are gorgeous. It's actually my favorite. It's kind of looking like at waves while you're underwater. I mean, these are actually beautiful. I mean, check these out. And then finally, we also have the big surfer waves of the Fluxus clouds. These are actually caused by winds above blowing faster than the winds within the cloud itself, so you kind of get that shape. So beautiful, right? There's just a sample of the new additions that we have. Meteorologists, sky watchers, daydreamers, we're all geeking out, guys.
No one asking why there are just suddenly these new types of clouds in the air. That's weird. And the last one that I added myself, just for my own research, this wasn't on any website, but last year, I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy, Eric Hecker, Raytheon whistleblower, comes out and goes on some really big podcasts, Sean Ryan, Patrick Bet-David, and some others, and talks about how he was a contractor in Antarctica as a plumber, and basically was given access to all of their facilities in this Raytheon base in Antarctica to basically be the guy that can fix everything when their plumbing goes down. And they had a freaking earthquake gun where they can shoot direct energy weapons through the earth and cause earthquakes wherever they want. And fucking madness out there, Matt. Like, so that's a little spiel of just random little tidbits I pulled out, just a few of them. There's a lot more, and I recommend going to see FRANKENSKIES, your movie, to see more. But what are your thoughts on all that? Like, which of those sticks out to you as the most pivotal? And are there any that you would add as like extremely important moments in history that people should know about?
Great job. You're really great. I appreciate you doing the research, and it's important. You know, it's not just for your own ego or for this interview. It's like, it's important to know, like people break down the word history and say it's his story, because whoever's in charge creates, the past and alters things and all that. And it's very important for us to know the truth on things, on all of it. Like, first off, truth is a vibration, it's a frequency. And as you open that door and give it the due diligence and honor and integrity that it deserves, you can ride that vibration of truth to other truths, on that frequency of truth. It's all truth. And so it's important to grasp like the path, the journey. I mean, to understand it, to embrace it, to see why we're here and all that sort of stuff. So not to be rude or condescending or anything, but the word Raytheon whistleblower to me is like a oxymoron, because or like Boeing whistleblower or any like government Northrop Grumman or CIA whistleblower, any of these, to me, likely, like these people are trillionaires that have these evil meetings that sit down how to control humanity for decades. They got rid of lead paint and then blamed it on the children eating it. A lot of people don't know that the petroleum industry was actually putting lead in the gasoline. They had some story saying it would like strengthen the engine or whatever, but lead fumes were blasting all over neighborhoods. Communities were laden with lead, and children were starting to show symptoms. And so these think tanks were like, hey, we got 5G coming, and they're going to be able to, we can't get these frequencies to blast through lead anyways. And we need it to be MK Ultra and people en masse, and we got to be able to do this heart frequency things and all these things that they like planned. 5G involves like your phone becoming a little cell tower, so it's got to engage with all the other towers, and they had to get rid of lead paint. Like that's another whole story. But I digress yet again. But it's like they're so evil that likely they're coming out with their own whistleblowers. Just saying. Although that guy could be authentic, it's up to us to like really resonate in our hearts and our guts. But like, I just want to say that my journey as an activist, I've become very jaded. So when you said like everything you said was amazing, but when you said Raytheon whistleblower, I was like, oh, I don't know, because it's just a vicious world, and whistleblowers get killed. And that whole earthquake gun is real, but it's through HARP, and maybe they want that information controlled a certain way, or they want it to be leaked on their own terms, or they want to garner consent or disclose to us or condition us or pre-program or predictive program or whatever their real means. Like, why would they come out with whistleblowers on their own? It's a whole thing. It keeps other whistleblowers from actually surfacing, because it's like, oh, someone did it, thank God I don't have to do it and risk my life. That's a whole psychological thing. But also they get to control the narrative, like 100%. Like they'll give you 90% truth or 10% truth, whatever they want for whatever they want. So that's my rant on that. But I love you.
I welcome that. I mean, obviously, when people come out just with large claims like this, it's important that we have like discourse about it and look both directions. Like, could this be real? Could it be totally set up? I mean, that's the power of the conversation, 100%.
Yeah, and like even I want everyone to turn the mirror on myself and like think about like Matt and who he could be. But like look at the sky. Like it doesn't matter what I say or who I am or anything like that. Like look at the sky. And if you want to watch FRANKENSKIES, please, that's a great idea too. So first of all, I have this, please, if anybody's on Facebook, my name is Matt Landman on Facebook. I'm luckily still got a platform there. I've got almost 90,000 followers, even with all the censorship and everything. And I had a woman reach out to me when those 12 new clouds were introduced, and she wrote this beautiful poem. And it listed each cloud name in verse. It was like, she must have spent some real time on it. And it was like talking about each cloud. Each cloud is chemtrails. Each cloud is like geoengineering in some form or another, whether it got zapped by HARP or sprayed this way or whatever. It's just complete mind a job. Like I'm doing my best not to curse, but it's like it's a mind job. So it's like
anything is welcome here. Don't hold back.
It's complete fuckery. They're coming out with the new clouds, because then people are like, oh, that's what that is, and they can give it a scientific name, and their ego is boosted, and then it's okay, and it's not a. But anyways, this woman, she wrote a poem about the 12 new clouds, and I wish I could pull it up right now and read it to you. It was so creative and genius and heartfelt. And one of the clouds is called Fluctus, Fluctus, and the whole thing's in stanza, and at the very end, she was like, so they flucked us. And I was like, oh, she's so genius. It was just like this play on words with all the cloud names and making fun of them, like totally taking the piss on their stupid thing. Hatfield in San Diego in like 1916-ish, whatever that was, he was hired by the city to make it rain. He was like, I think I can make it rain. They're like, really? Cool. Here's your your potential paycheck. And and then he built a tower like 35 feet tall. That's it. Like he built this platform, and then went up there and had this like secret chemical solution, and probably had some silver iodide and other things that would seed clouds. Basically, the concept of seeding clouds is the way that rain falls out of a cloud is there's all these little drops, and then one drop will like form around a piece of dust or something called a cloud seed, and then other drops will like attach to that and like couple with it and get heavier and heavier, and then it'll fall. So there's like that's why that one scientist, which is news to me, I actually learned something from you, buddy Ben. That's amazing that scientist was saying, or that researcher or whatever was saying, make fires in the West Coast to make it rain in the East. You know,
Yeah, and it was just an idea back then. They weren't actually doing these things, but it was being proposed that far long ago, which is crazy.
Right. Well, it's amazing to me is it makes sense, because if you learn about Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050, and all this sort of stuff, the East Coast is not under attack. They're getting plenty of snowpack, plenty of rain, and all this sort of stuff. But the West Coast is just being lit up. I mean, like with engineered lightning storms, arsons, like just the fire agenda here is out of control. And then if we really go deep down at aluminum oxide, barium salts, these are what are being sprayed in the chemtrail constituents. These are patented fire accelerants. These are things
they're incendiary. They're literally causing all this. It's crazy.
And aluminum, it gets in the soil and it gets in the trees, and it disrupts the trees from uptaking water and makes them really flammable and messed up. And it's like this whole agenda. So people, like, as you know, conspiracy theorists or truthers, I like the word truthers, people waking up have been like, why are there grid patterns over these forests? You know, because the conspiracy theories, they're spraying cities with, you know, poisons to make everyone die, whatever it is. You know, the mainstream narrative of what chemtrail conspiracy theorists think. But then come to find out, they're spraying all these forests, and people started to scratch their heads. So I'll go on a little tangent, and then I'm going to get back to what you talked about. So there was a group in northern Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, and this is like a very grounded community of like, this is not like hippie community, you know, Kingman, Arizona. These are very like old. I met these people. They're like old farmers and like workers and normal people, you know. And 30 people came together in Kingman, Arizona, because they were wondering what was up with the chemtrails. They tested their blood. They tested the rainwater after there was high sprays, because sometimes the clouds come in, drop rain, and there's no chemtrails. But sometimes the clouds come in, they spray like crazy, and they drop the rain. You can get the water, sample it, and send it in and test it for aluminum, barium, strontium, lead, manganese, whatever, lithium and all sorts of stuff. But you have to tell them what you wanted to give a test for, so that's interesting. But this group, they tested the soil, they tested their blood, their hair, and this matches with these patents as well. So people aren't just like, oh, they're spraying aluminum. There's weather modification patents, and then they see the lines in the sky change. They're not admitting to it, but that's obvious. You know, it's like, what do they admit to? Like, has anybody gone down the fluoride rabbit hole? It's like, that's a good place to start. There's no efficacy. There's no proof that the fluoride being in your drinking water is just bonding to your teeth that microsecond as it's going by. It's ruining. There's fluorosis can ruin. I had a girlfriend, and her daughter had fluorosis. Her teeth she had bone pain all the time. She couldn't grow her teeth in. It's like fluoride is a very toxic byproduct of the aluminum industry. So when they smelt aluminum and make aluminum, fluoride comes off of it as a byproduct. It's a toxic waste product. And then it wants to bond back to aluminum because it was bonded to aluminum, right? So then it's a two-tier thing or two-pronged attack, whatever. You get fluoride in your system from your toothpaste, from your drinking water, from your dentist or whatever. And then you get aluminum in your system from your deodorant, from your food, from, you know, all these things.
And
you
now
gotta be
from
careful.
the air that you're breathing.
And the
because
air.
It's all coming down.
And fluoride will bypass your blood-brain barrier because it's nano level. It'll get in your brain, and then it'll actually pull the aluminum from your blood to your brain, and then cause Alzheimer's, dementia. There's rising, the number one cause of death in the UK is Alzheimer's and dementia, which comes from aluminum toxicity in the brain, and all these things. You know, there's a huge elephant in the room. People aren't talking about it, and it is chemtrails. So this group in Arizona, like once I met them and talked to them, I was like, wow, it makes perfect sense what we're seeing and you know what's going on, because they were really able to narrow it down. Like, look, it's in the water after they spray. It's spiking in our soil, wasn't there before. It's spiking in our blood. There's like it's in the patents for the weather modification. They'll come and they'll spray, and we're supposed to get like 5 inches of rain. We get a 1/4 inch, and it's full of aluminum. It's like at a certain point, it's not just corollary. It's not just guess. It's not just like maybes. Like there's a scientific process, you know, where you hypothesize and you keep narrowing it down. Then you're like, okay, we've come to a conclusion. So it is aluminum, barium, and strontium. We've come. It's not just like. I just want to stress that. So, anyways, Hatfield, we talked about him. We're going to talk about now Iran and HAARP. So, after Vietnam, which that's cool that you went there, and of course they hate us. I'd hate us too. After Vietnam, weather warfare got a little, it became illegal. So, but there were laws passed that if you're going to experiment with this stuff, it has to be on your own population. It's like literally laws.
As long as it's for quote unquote research purposes,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
like if you can say it's for research, it's okay.
Right, but you can do it on your people without their knowing, which is nuts. Which is like when you're watching the movie FRANKENSKIES and it gets to the point where that reporter's in St. Louis and she does this whole investigation and finds out that St. Louis was sprayed with radioactive particles of zinc cadmium sulfide. And literally they went into primarily black neighborhoods, which is worth noting. But, you know, they went into low-income neighborhoods. Primarily children were impacted. And they sprayed from airplanes. And they did a cover story even saying that they just wanted to make sure they had a proper smoke screen in case the Russians came, right? And they didn't just spray from planes. They outfitted station wagons with sprayers and even put sprayers on rooftops of like big apartment complexes, and then waited patiently to see these children come into the hospital.
This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino-Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy, clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirmed the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide.
The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12.
Martino-Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night, so the government could measure its effects on their lungs.
So this was in violation of all medical ethics, all international codes, and the military's own policy at that time.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building on Lindell and in Forest Park. The Army always insisted the chemical compound was safe. Martino Taylor believes documents prove otherwise.
There's a lot of evidence that indicates that people in St. Louis, in the city, particularly in minority communities, were subjected to military tests that was connected to a larger radiological weapons development and testing project.
For the first time, she links the St. Louis testing to a company called U.S. Radium, a company notorious for lawsuits involving radioactive contamination of its workers.
United States Radium had this reputation where they had been found legally liable decades prior for producing a radioactive powdered paint that killed many young women who painted fluorescent watch dials.
While the Army admits it added a fluorescent substance to the zinc-cadmium compound, details of whether it was radioactive remain secret. Documents uncovered to date indicate the Army never conducted follow-up studies to see whether the compound caused long-term health issues.
Like, this is on their own people. Like, it makes you really question a lot of things. Like, there's so many rabbit holes. Like, did we even win World War II? Like, I think we might have merged with the enemy or something. Like, something really evil is afoot if they're doing things like that. So, weather warfare is like covert. They won't admit they're doing it. They do it to us, their own people. And the president of Iran comes out, and he publicly, President Ahmadinejad, and he's like, look, I never believed this could possibly be true, but my advisors have come to me, and I've investigated it. And there's ongoing weather warfare on my country where European countries will basically drain the clouds before the systems get to my country, so we're not getting our rains, you know? And the media, the Western media, played it like he was just a crazy conspiracy theorist, you know? Like, oh, that's crazy conspiracy theorists, you know? How much we trust Iran, right? Because the media's done a good job demonizing them. And so I found that just like shocking and telling and amazing. I mean, like, it's like we've had it out for Iran for a long time, and likely, sadly, somewhere in the next decade we'll be in some world war with them because for some reason we just can't stop. We just can't stop as a warmongering country. We just cannot stop. It's not going to stop. It's sad. I will never get behind the bloodshed, and it's ridiculous. And there's a big bullseye on Iran. There was a whistleblower. There was a top military official that came out and said that he was in this boardroom and that they were like, we got 5 countries. We're going to, this is after 9/11. We're going to Syria. They list them all off. And everyone has been occupied now by the U.S. except for Iran. But it's like, you got to really get in there and surround them first, a big country. But I really hope that doesn't happen. But it's like the writing's on the wall. They can't stop talking about it. It's actually absurd because like Iranian officials will go to neighboring countries and just get drone attacked, and it's us and Israel doing it, and it's like, I mean, like World War II is already. This is a whole nother story. So also HARP. I mean, it's all connected, you know. The Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, the Rothschilds, the Bohemian Grove, the Trilateral Commission. These are all little just rich groups that come together, and they're not on the side of good. Like, for those that don't really grasp it, like, Earth is a very interesting place where there's a ongoing war of good and evil, and we get to pick sides, and we actually have souls that go on past this place, and evidently there's maybe karma, and people are always like, well, why would they do that to us? And they wouldn't do that to themselves. There's questions I get every single time. And it's deeper than that. It's deeper than you can fathom. You know, at the end of the game, people want to know the who, what, why, where, when, how of topics, especially chemtrails, so that they can answer the questions when their peers and family try to ridicule them. They can answer these questions. But I mean, it takes a lot of investigation, deep research to grasp the who, what, where, when, how, and all those things. And really, you got to meet people where they're at. You know, I'm not going to tell my grandmother that I think that it's a transhumanism agenda and they want to turn everyone into robots by making everyone not able to reproduce. You know, I think in the next decade, we'll start to see the fertility rates plummet, and it'll push this whole new agenda of like, oh, become a robot. Mr. Elon Musk has it all ready for you and stuff like that. But either way, there's like a whole situation. So meeting people where they're at is very important. You don't have to have all the answers. Planting the seeds. FRANKENSKIES is a great bit. And FRANKENSKIES 2, so FRANKENSKIES.com for the first one. FRANKENSKIES2.com for the second one, and I'm working on a sequel. It's going to include so much more. Like fires could have rain made on them, and the media never talks about these fires. Like still, there's fires raging on the West Coast, and the media will never say we can see clouds. It's like that was common knowledge decades ago, but now it's not even spoken of. There's these 15-minute cities and green agenda, and they say net zero is this thing by 2050, or different cities have different goals. But by 2050, they don't want anybody releasing any carbon, and the whole system's going to go down to becoming carbon oriented, and they might do climate change lockdowns. This is all surrounding this farce that is global warming is here. And the thing is that people need to grasp, which is the biggest point of this show should be, is there is basically some climate change and global warming, but it's being created, engineered, geoengineered. They will create a heat wave. They will then blanket that sky with metals and trap that heat, and then create another heat wave the next day. And then the temperatures are going up. There's this thing called HAARP. It's an acronym, HAARP. It started in Alaska, and it's this huge field, like imagine a football field, even bigger, of antennas, and each antenna is, I believe, like 75 feet approximately. Okay, these huge antennas, and it's a field full of them, right? And a whole array of these antennas. And what they do is they can pick a point in the atmosphere on Earth and microwave them by using intersecting radio waves. So the same exact concept of the microwave, you put food in the microwave, you turn it on, and there's actually small radio waves called microwaves that are hitting the food and intersecting in the food. So smashing into each other at that food, at that focal point. And the water in the food is oscillating because of the bombardment of radio waves. And the longer you leave it in there, the more it heats up. And so that's how you microwave water, which is in food, in a microwave. So that same concept is used with this antenna array. It's in Alaska to pick a focal point in the atmosphere and superheat it.
In 1993, the FAA started warning pilots to stay away from a certain section of airspace over Alaska. The U.S. government was experimenting with a new breed of high-altitude electronic technology that was significantly altering the Alaskan airspace. The experiments continue to this day, and critics are warning that this project could have global effects that will destroy our planet. In Alaska, the rugged, pristine wilderness is timeless, most of it remaining just as it has for thousands of years. In the midst of all this natural beauty, just outside the small town of Gakona, stands an enormous and seemingly harmless antenna farm. It is a $100 million Air Force project known as HAARP, and critics of the soon-to-be completed facility charge it just may turn out to be the ultimate doomsday machine.
It's got all the marks of Dr. Strangelove on it.
HAARP is an acronym for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. According to program manager John Hesher, HAARP is a research facility designed to study the ionosphere.
All the military have communications, surveillance, navigation systems whose paths either traverse the ionosphere or reflect from it. And so we need to be very careful about what we know about it and how we study it. What we're interested in is what is the effect of a large input of energy on the ionosphere.
The ionosphere is the outermost layer of the Earth's atmosphere. It is part of an electromagnetic field that keeps out harmful solar and cosmic radiation. One visible effect of the sun's rays hitting the ionosphere is the aurora borealis, known as the northern lights. The ionosphere also plays a vital role in worldwide radio communication.
The first transmission of radio waves across the ocean were quite a surprise when it was first done. People thought there'd be no chance to transmit the signals across the ocean by wireless. And in fact, what the ionosphere does is act like a mirror. And so you transmit a signal and it bounces off the ionosphere and then it bounces off the Earth.
When HAARP is fully operational, it will transmit extremely powerful blasts of high-frequency radio waves directly up into the atmosphere, superheating the electrons that make up the ionosphere. This will cause them to disperse, effectively punching a hole in the ionosphere.
But after you turn the instrument off, this thing kind of moves around and it gets replenished. And within a few minutes, it's back to where you can't even detect that there's a hole anymore.
The Air Force says that manipulating the ionosphere and studying the effect will allow them to improve the efficiency of communications, navigation, and surveillance systems. But researchers outside the military see HAARP as a high-tech weapon with global implications.
The way I see HAARP as it is right now, it is a premier, top-notch, high-energy radio physics experiment, and it has definite military applications.
Journalist Mark Farmer lives in Alaska and has written about the potential impact of HAARP for both Jane's Defense Weekly and Popular Science magazine. He believes that HAARP will be used to take giant X-rays of Earth.
Earth-penetrating tomography is a technique using extremely low-frequency radio waves. Today in geophysical probing, scientists will use explosives or a machine that thumps the ground to produce these waves, but HAARP will stimulate the auroral electrojet to make an antenna thousands of miles long that will emit these ELF waves.
Farmer's research indicates that the extremely low-frequency waves would be capable of penetrating several kilometers into the Earth, ferreting out nuclear storage facilities and other underground military installations.
This is producing surveillance systems able to detect stealthy cruise missiles and aircraft. These are systems that will enable us to communicate at higher data rates and at greater distances with our ballistic missile submarines.
While the Air Force insists HAARP is not an offensive weapon and is necessary for continuing national security, Alaska native Nick Begich proposes a different scenario in this new book.
The things that we found in other Air Force documents, one in particular was a document put together in '82. The document was called Low Intensity Conflict in Modern Technology, with a foreword by none other than Newt Gingrich. One section spoke about using radio frequency radiation transmitters for disrupting human thinking, for basically debilitating troops invisibly by being able to bombard them with radio frequency that was tuned to just the right frequency, in just the right waveform, so as to totally disrupt their mental process and basically debilitate those troops.
Because of HAARP's potential to disrupt the Earth's magnetic field, many observers are concerned that it will damage the biomagnetic sensors that migratory animals like salmon and birds depend upon. But what generates the most concern by far is HAARP's ability to tamper with and punch holes in the ionosphere.
The thing that one of the Air Force documents points out is that they want to use this heater to create enough energy in the ionosphere to get a runaway effect up to the next stabilizing level, whatever that might be.
It's precisely whatever that might be that worries Dr. Patrick Flanagan, a physicist who believes the ionosphere is extremely fragile.
The ionosphere is a chaotic system that is on the edge of instability. So the trigger point for HAARP would be that energy and that frequency which throws the ionosphere into chaos. In other words, it would be that point which throws it over the edge.
For example, it is believed that a hole in the Earth's ozone layer has caused an increase in infrared radiation, contributing to the melting of the polar ice caps and forcing New Zealand children to wear protective clothing to school. Flanagan and others believe the potential danger from a hole in the ionosphere is much greater.
It could create a change in the ionospheric shield that protects us from cosmic radiation. We're worried about the ozone layer. The ozone layer is nothing compared to what HAARP could do. You know, we're worried about ultraviolet light. That's just a very harmless ray compared to some of those energy streams or particles that are coming from outer space that are being deflected by this natural shield around the Earth. And this is what HAARP wants to play with.
Critics worry that HAARP has been placed in the hands of too few, and that international debate is necessary to fully explore all the potential dangers that this project may soon unleash, a proposal in which the Air Force has shown little interest to date.
Once we open this box, and it is a veritable Pandora's box, we're not going to be able to close it. And of course, once you acquire a technology, you want bigger and better aspects of it. And then we come into the questions of whether or not, if we go big, if we go better, if we're going to cause damage to our planet.
So the same concept is used with this antenna array, it's in Alaska, to pick a focal point in the atmosphere and superheat it. And then if you can heat the atmosphere, you can create an H, like when you're watching the weather on the news, you can create an H, which is high pressure, heat rising. If you can create H's, you can steer weather patterns and steer jet streams and do all sorts of things, right? So the HAARP technology, this is like in FRANKENSKIES, they talk about it openly. And back in the day, like 5-10 years ago, this was a conspiracy theory. This was not openly discussed. It was like and it wasn't even real. But now the technology has been passed on to the university, and it's actually like old, like it's like ancient tech now at this point. And they've got smaller versions of it called ionospheric heaters. And some of them are in the form of these things called NexRad that are these big golf ball looking things on mountainsides that they say they're predicting the weather, but they're actually controlling it as well, which is ironic. But they're smaller stations around the world, and they will superheat focal points in the atmosphere to engineer the weather. Now, when they lay out chemtrails, and they'll do different chemicals that mix together, charges different ways, you'll like give the aluminum a positive charge, give the barium a negative charge, mix it together, and then zap it with these frequencies. They can dictate a lot of stuff. They can do so many things, make tornadoes, make hurricanes, make hot air, make hot, super high pressure. So they can make heat waves and then tell the media to tell everyone that it's global warming and it's because of their carbon emissions, which we exhale carbon all day long. No one's talking about planting trees, which if they really cared, we'd always be planting trees. You know, that would be like the reality of it. If there really was a green push, a real green narrative, there would be tree planting all the time. It would always be in the news. Like, oh, we're so worried about carbon that because trees absorb carbon. So a lot of people that don't know that the number one greenhouse gas is actually water vapor, that clouds will create a greenhouse effect way faster than carbon dioxide, carbon's not really the problem. Long story short, carbon's not the problem. You can look into it all you want. And if you start to really dig, I encourage people to do their own research, because these climatologists that are all under this wide umbrella of saying that climate change is real and we need to do something about it, the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, which is pulling all these strings right now with the World Economic Forum and stuff. A lot of these researchers are not even credible, and there's just as many people saying that it's not true. All right. And a lot of those people that are saying it's not true, they don't even know about the geoengineering aspect of it, which is the full truth, which it is kind of true because they're doing it, you know, and using those headlines to be like, see, it's 120. It's like, dude, it's 120 because you made 120. Come on, I watched it go down. So that's like a thing. That's a whole thing to witness and to grasp and to understand that it's this play that's always going down. It's this George Hegel. Hegel was a psychologist, philosopher at the turn of the century, and he created this idea of this master-slave dialectic called the Hegelian dialectic that kind of corners your thinking. And it's this problem, reaction, solution scenario that they do for a lot of things. It's like 9/11 was this problem. Everyone's in fear because of terrorists. Well, what's the solution? It's like, we're going to go get Saddam Hussein. Nobody even thought twice.
And the
You know,
Patriot
it's like
Act, we're going to start,
all that.
surveillance everywhere, control everything you do.
Pre-planned problem, pre-planned public reaction, pre-planned solution, and they do it. You know, it's very textbook, and the public, it's got such a good heart. You know, like my mom, she wants to believe in angels, but not demons. She wants to believe that there's good, but the government would never do that to us. You know, like, because people have good hearts, but we live in a world of polarity and duality, and like the bad is not going to tell you that they're bad. That's just part of it. So it's very wild and evil, and everyone needs to wake up. But really, it's something. And so there's this green agenda unrolling, and they've got like these electric, EV vehicles with these lithium batteries, and we're learning now that these lithium batteries can go on fire, and that you can't even put the fire out; they burn. I forget what it is, like 600. They burn so hot that you just can't do anything about it. Like I've seen stories where a Tesla caught on fire and it burned down a whole concrete parking garage because it was parked on the bottom floor. And then come to find out, these lithium batteries, they're toxic for one. I learned about lithium mining, and that's something Cobalt read this book on lithium mining. It's horrible for the people and the environment and everything like that. But then these lithium batteries are also in other things like smart meters. And I'm learning now that these neighborhoods are burning really hot in these forest fires, which is like they're burning down neighborhoods now. It's like not forest fires, but they're burning really hot and really crazy because of these smart meters have these lithium batteries in them. So there's these electrical fires through the homes with these, and that's why the forests are like staying intact. These homes are burning. This whole agenda to push the smart city agenda and push people out of the rural communities and all that sort of stuff. Another thing to know is Al Gore and Greta, these spokespeople for global warming fear, right? Is I watched that Al Gore movie with his hockey stick and his hockey stick graph, where it's like the carbon going up so much that we're going to go into another catastrophic, we're all going to die thing. I watched that movie, An Inconvenient Truth, which was also a book, and the play was perfect. Like, oh, he should have won the presidency. He should have won Florida. We all know it. Poor guy. It's like a play on everybody, right? Because it's all planned. Sorry, everyone. Politics. Whew, it's another story. So Al Gore became the spokesperson for this whole thing. But little did everyone know, he started making all this money being this green consultant. Got these like beachfront homes, along with Obama and all these other people that are saying that the sea level is rising, but they got these beachfront mansions. And nothing that he said came true. Like, he made these predictions and pushed it so hard that it became curriculum in schools. And then in the UK, this angry dad, he took it to the UK like school Supreme Court and like fought it and got it pulled, because this judge was like, okay, there's all these lies, like it's just overly sensual, whatever the word is. It's like Hollywood, basically. None of these things came true. We have to pull it. It got pulled from, especially the Kent school district, really worth looking into, because this thing is taken as gospel, right? And Greta's words are taken as gospel, but none of their predictions come true. They're just pushing this in this fear space, saying these things need to happen. We need to make these laws when nothing's happening. So there's a movie called Sand Wars that I love, and it's by PBS. And it blew my mind, really. And it talks about these islands that say they're going underwater from sea level rise, which if you ever live by the ocean, or maybe go check out the Statue of Liberty or something, or, there's a lot of evidence, that sea levels have not risen at all. There's high tides and there's storms, but like there's not been anything, zero, nothing at all. Nothing has happened. But there are some island nations that are dealing with erosion and rapid erosion. And in this movie, Sand Wars, I learned that sand is actually this amazing commodity, and that there's a sand mafia, and they go with barges, huge barge ships, in the middle of the night, and they thieve sand from islands, because sand is this commodity that's used in construction, and like countries like Dubai and Malaysia and Singapore, they need a lot of it, and they don't have enough. And you can't use desert sand; it's too refined by the wind. So you have to use ocean sand and it's used in concrete. So all concrete, like all buildings, anything construction needs the sand. So it's actually this commodity that's being stolen, and then rapid erosion is happening, and then the Western media is being like, this poor country is underwater because of your Hummer, because you have an SUV or whatever, because you exhale carbon all day. But it's not even true. It's total lies. So it's like they say the planet's heating up rapidly and all this stuff, but they don't show you the proper graphs. They cherry pick the data. They cherry pick data that they've created through creating the heat waves and then using that data. But even if they used all the overarching data, there's still no like rapid heating problem or ice cap melting or like that polar bear. And I'll be done with my rant for a minute. But there's a polar bear that was on a tiny little iceberg, and it was like skinny, and it saw 1 billion people. This thing went viral, and everyone's like, I should feel guilty for global warming because look at this poor bear, right? Okay. Come to find out, that bear was a composite collage image. It wasn't even real. So it was CGI for one. And then if you do the research, which there has been research, like Canadian tundra, like scientists and stuff, the polar bears are doing great. There's no like big polar bear die off. They're doing fine. Like ice comes and goes, in some places there's a little more, some a little less, whatever. But that's nature and natural ecosystem. The polar bears are actually thriving. But these little cherry-picked CGI photos that say, "Oh, look what you've done, humans! It's all your fault." Okay. Now here's another interesting tidbit. I said I'd give you the mic, but one more thing.
No, go off, man. I love it.
When I was doing all my digging and stuff, because it's like I became the chemtrail guy, man, and I kept giving it energy, and now I'm like, if not the chemtrail guy, I'm like one of the top chemtrail dudes. And so people hit me up with all the questions. I got to have answers. I go on shows and all the stuff. People are sending me things and stuff. And I came across this document out of control. It's called the Tropospheric Aerosol Program, Department of Energy document. TAP stands for Tropospheric Aerosol Program, DOE, Department of Energy, and then it's a PDF file. So it's like very easily found. And you said, remember earlier, you were like, they talk about stratospheric aerosol injections, solar radiation management, all these different keywords. You can find all this stuff: sun dimming, cloud brightening, David Keith, blah, 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 Bill Gates. But it's like, nowhere do they say chemtrails, right? It's like, oh, they're saying it, but in these sciencey words that are like, confusing everybody. But they won't admit that it's ongoing. They won't admit that it's the problem. They won't admit all the health impacts and whatever that it's doing to the insects, everything, all these things. So it's like all that. So in 2001, I think March, it was just before one of the biggest distractions we've ever seen, which is 9/11, right? Which is, of course, in the fall of, that anniversary is coming up, in the fall of 2001. So in the beginning of 2001, this document comes out. It's called the TAP DOE PDF. Easily found on the internet. It's actually on my website, actualactivists.com, in the chemtrail section. I made this website, Actual Activists, and it's just like a one-stop shop for truth. I've got a daily blog, just truth, every subject.
It's awesome. I'll put it in the
Thanks.
show notes for sure.
Yeah, thank you. So this document from the Department of Energy, right, which, come to find out, the Department of Energy is like coal, burning, oil, right? So in the United States, the Department of Energy is a lot of dirty energy, right? And they came out with this like 100-page document in 2001 called Tropospheric Aerosol Program, where they're launching this program where they spray the skies with aerosols. And in it, it's like so wordy and verbose, and they don't use the word geoengineering, chemtrails, or contrails, right? But they talk about this whole program that they're launching with ground-based stations, helicopters, a fleet of planes and drones, all this sciencey shit. And in the very end of it, there's this pie chart, like glossary, And they spend like $4.5 million on detection, aversion, and risk assessment. Detection, aversion, and risk assessment is like not getting caught by the public, like not being exposed, right? So they're dropping millions of dollars on year one just to not get caught. And it's like, in it says this is extrapolated. Next year, we're going to be doing like 50% more, whatever. So each year they're going to be building on their budget, whatever. So this is like the first year that this thing was launched. So we're over here worried about terrorism, and they're launching a freaking full-on troposphere is a area in the atmosphere. It's like troposphere, ionosphere, stratosphere, area, region, like levels of it. I believe the troposphere is closer to us. And then when you spray in the troposphere, you trap heat. But if you put clouds higher up, it deflects it. There's different clouds that do different things. And the spraying that they do usually creates heat, even though like they're probably telling their minions that they're dimming the sun. So many people are like, how could they possibly do that? It's like they're compartmentalized. They're on a need-to-know basis. They're being told they're saving the world, and to shut up, it's top secret, you know? So there's all that. But in the tropospheric aerosol program, if you start to really like wrap your head around this whole massive conspiracy, the ones that are doing the polluting and really releasing all of the carbon in the atmosphere. I mean, like a coal burning power plant is doing way more than my Honda, you know what I mean? And my exhalation, right? So dirty energy, let's call them like the right? So there's left and right in this country, and they're being posed against each other and all this sort of stuff. So the right is now behind a big portion of the chemtrails, which is interesting. And then also come to find out NASA has a program called CARE, Charged Aerosol Release Experiment. And they have a whole fleet of planes and drones, and they spray aluminum, barium, strontium to make noctilucent clouds. They say it right there in plain sight. But it's like, how much? I don't know. What's your budget, NASA? Oh, $90 million a day. What? For real? Taxpayer money, $90 million per day? It's like, wow. And that's going, it just keeps going up. It was like 50 million a day, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's just like crazy. They have a whole chemtrail program. But to wrap your head around it, you've got the left being like green agenda, solar powered farms and electric vehicles. Then you've got the right being like, no, we're not doing anything wrong. Keep using us. But also, if you're super worried about what you're worried about, we have a solution. It's geoengineering, right? But they're not really saying that they're behind it. They're just got their puppets, right? So you got these two people, these two sides fighting. Meanwhile, when you plug an electrical vehicle in, it's going over here to the coal burning power plant anyways, right? And when you plug in your solar power, they're over here dimming the sun, so you don't even get any energy anyways. So you got to revert back to their coal burning power plant anyways, right?
And that's where a lot of people fall into this rabbit hole too, is where they had solar and they realized like, what the fuck? Like, I'm not getting as much energy as I used to. The sky is just turning hazy all the time now. Like, what's up with this?
So both sides are controlled, and it's insane. And it's just a wild, when you really wrap your head around like the left-right paradigm, it's like before it was, oh, the right Republicans, they don't care about the environment. So obviously I'm going to be on the left with the blue and the Obama and whatever. But then now that side has been so hijacked that they're like, yeah, you got to go live in a 15-minute cities and have a technocracy. Like I just went to the UK. They have it so locked down over there already. All of London, if your car is more than like 10 years old, if you drive it at all for 1 second, there's cameras taking photos and sending you a ticket for 12 and a half pounds, which is like $18. And it's only a tax on having like a semi-old car. You could have a big SUV that's not emission friendly. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just the fact that you could afford a new car, you don't have to pay the tax. So it's really just a tax on the poor. And they're in the Netherlands. I'm on this tangent, but this is almost done. In the Netherlands, they're saying that there's greenhouse gases, and they've now started blaming nitrogen. And they've now shut down 3,000 farms in the Netherlands saying that they're adding to global warming. And so they're taking away like cows because of cow farts and dairy farms and just all this sort of stuff because this agenda has been bought so heavily. And especially Europe is just jumping down everyone's throats. I mean, I'm learning so many things about methane and cows, and like cows burp anyways. They hardly even fart. Like people don't even realize that. And evidently the grass is going to release methane anyways, whether it's on the ground or eaten by the cows. And it's like, there's so many things that are contrary to what the mainstream media tells you that almost everything they say is a lie. And people are starting to realize that. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that conversation that you are setting up, because I'm working on a blog post about that. I want to start writing more about this and just how both sides of the climate debate are wrong. You know, and that was a huge mind-blowing moment for me, because I grew up, you know, here on the West Coast, very left-leaning household and environment, school, everything. So I was very much on that side for a long time. And then when I got into the Bitcoin worlds, the Bitcoiners are typically a much more skeptical bunch, and they're basically saying it's all a total fraud. Like, you know, Al Gore, Greta, they're all, you know, just puppets, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gone through the geoengineering rabbit hole, I'm really realizing that both of them have pieces correct, but are missing the bigger picture. Because like you said, there is climate change going on, but it's not because of people driving cars. It's because they are pumping chemicals into the air, using HARP to manipulate the weather patterns, causing all this shit everywhere. These like huge experiments, they're just, you know, exerting power because they can, using our tax dollars. And that's the reason why we're having all these, you know, more extreme weather events everywhere, much more destructive. The wildlife is dying off, and that's another thing. You talked about the bees. Literally a couple days ago, like this, over the course of this last weekend, I walked down to my local grocery store to pick up water. Like, we get these big water jugs filled up with their reverse osmosis filter, and it's kind of like a nice workout. It's about a mile, and I carry these big jugs home. And I was just looking on my way home. There's gardens everywhere. There's plants everywhere. Especially like by our local hospital, there's this like beautiful garden full of flowers. And I'm just seeing dead bees on the ground everywhere. I probably saw at least a dozen or more dead bees just on the sidewalk right next to these gardens. And that's not normal. And I know that there's studies out there, and I believe it was in your movie as well, talking about how they're testing these bees. They're full of aluminum. They're full of aluminum microparticles. They're having the same problems that humans are with their dementia and Alzheimer's. And they're just getting wiped out by these nanoparticles being pumped into the air. And just wildlife in general too. There's so much nature where I am, so I'm always out. I'm outside right now, and I can definitely tell there's less birds around. There's less birds singing, and one that I it's difficult to confirm, but I just feel like I have a hunch, is that it just seems like the trees and the flowers and the flora are just less lively looking. It's like the saturation sliders turned down a little bit. I don't know about that one because it's really tough to, you know, I could just be seeing things I'm thinking about, you know, I could be overthinking it, who knows. But I mean, this is the part of the argument that the green people have correct, is that there is a problem out there, but they're missing the actual root cause. And so this is so fascinating to me, because, you know, being on both sides of this argument at some point, how they're both close to getting it in their own way. The green people are close because they're right about the climate change part. They just are being fooled by the puppets, as you talked about, the characters on TV. And the people on the skeptical side are also fooled by those same puppets. They're saying, oh, like, you know, Al Gore's a scammer, Greta's a puppet. These people don't know anything, so the whole thing's a fraud. I kind of missed when I was there, to be honest, because it was really relaxing. It's very chill, just to think that everything was a lie and not, you know, nothing is actually going wrong here. But it all comes together, and geoengineering is going on above all of that, and it's everyone's fooled right now, which is wild. Everyone is wrong about this, and they're missing the key piece of the puzzle there, which just blows my mind.
Yeah, thank you, and it's important for people to grasp it. So the bees are severely impacted, but there's also other things like glyphosate and increased use of pesticides is an attributing factor. There was a study out of the UK called splat rate, or splatter rate, and it was just like how many bugs accumulated on a windshield during like a drive through the country. And it was so noticeable that I believe it was like a university did a study, and over the past decade, they showed a 70% decline in splatter rate. And they focused on areas that weren't by the cities or weren't, industrial or anything like that, just like good places to do the experiment. So they're they don't know why, but it's like, look up. Yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but what's the splatter rate again?
How many bugs splatter on a windshield
okay, gotcha.
on like a drive through a certain region. And then that same drive, 5 years later, that same drive, and they charted it and showed like, look, I'll drive through this country from York to Lincolnshire or whatever in England, where it's country still, farmland and stuff. And just the bugs are just not there anymore. There's like the glyphosate is just insane. For people that don't know, Roundup, which is also called glyphosate, it's an herbicide, and people will use it and they'll spray it on like dandelions, which is just ignorant because dandelion is a medicine, and now you're spraying a carcinogenic, like cancer-causing chemical on your lawn that can kill your pets and give your children cancer and stuff. And it's actually a court case showed that this guy got cancer from it, gave him $50 million or whatever. It's like proven in the court of law that glyphosate is like horribly bad. So the story, like some people are like, oh, I don't buy organic because it's expensive or whatever. It's because maybe you don't understand exactly what GMO means. GMO means this. It's like, oh, it's so complicated. They genetically modified it. Well, it's okay if they genetically modify it. It's not that bad, is it? It's not that you're eating something that's genetically modified. That's not the point. I mean, that is part of it. But the point is that its genes, the plant's genes, have been altered so that certain things have been turned on and off in its DNA so that it can get sprayed down with poison. And that poison would otherwise make the plant wither up and die. So they alter its genetics, but not the genetics of the weeds all around it. And then they can just spray everything with this poison that's toxic for you. You can't wash it off. It's horribly bad for you. It's in the Cheerios and stuff, like glyphosate. Look it up. If you don't know about glyphosate, it's a whole beginning of your experience of learning. And
I explored that one while learning about the carnivore diet too, just how pretty much every plant out there just being dumped on this stuff. It's really closely linked to autism rates and all these terrible things for people. It's nasty.
If you buy up farmland that has glyphosate been sprayed on it, because a lot of these big farms do, big ag, and you want to have that be certified organic, I think it's 7 years that it takes for it to get out of the soil. Which is just like, come on, it's like that. It means they're spraying it every year and it's building up. So that's the whole thing. So splatter rate and Al Gore, and I forget what else. I usually make little notes on what else I was going to talk about.
We got so many directions here. I knew it was going to be like this. It's hard to be linear with things this vast.
Yeah. So, the bees. We'll talk about the bees. So the bees are being impacted. And so Monsanto got bought by Bayer because their name was being so muddied, and they were sold for $66.6 billion. It's like, come on. And Monsanto created a Franken bee that can withstand all of this onslaught of aluminum and glyphosate and all this stuff, because they see a problem. Like, these pollinators are dropping like flies, and something needs to be done. And it's pretty scary. When did you see these dead bees? Because they did, for some reason, during the full moon, they sprayed like crazy here. Was it recently?
Probably like a week ago.
Okay, cool.
5-7 days ago. I can't remember the exact day, but in terms of just like less wildlife, this area, I routinely go mountain biking out in the forest, and I don't see any animals anymore. That's just persistent.
Oh, I did make a note. It's UV. So I was on track. So you're talking about the liveliness of the plants, and it feels like things are kind of not as vibrant as they could be.
Yeah, exactly.
I love white peaches. They're so good. I didn't even know they existed when I grew up in Virginia. For some reason, I didn't know about white peaches. White peaches are my favorite. They're really delicious, kind of sweet and different texture. At my organic co-op in Ashland, Oregon, where I live, they don't sell white peaches this year. And I asked the produce guy, he got the manager to come out, and they were like, yeah, there's some weird fungus thing on the white peaches this year. They're all just molding before they ripen, and we can't get any good ones out of California. He's like, I'm gonna have to try Washington or something, but I can't supply them. It's very abnormal, right? And I've talked to other farmers who are in the know, and they say that when the chemtrails are sprayed, that the sun goes from like this yellow warm tint that's like nourishing and nice to be under, you know, like you want to lay out in the sun, to this like white light, like you're under like a grow light, like almost like an LED light, because of the aluminum refraction and what's going on up there with the spray. So when the sunlight's going through the aluminized metallic chem haze, the light that we get is different. It's more white. And I've noticed, and so have these farmers that I've been talking to, that you'll burn, like your skin will burn really fast. I'm Sicilian, and like I can sit out in the sun forever and I just get tan, but I'll be out in this chem haze for like 10 minutes and I'll get burned. It's crazy. And also this shift in the UV is detrimental. It's picked up by the plants. So certain plants like cilantro or sensitive plants, they'll bolt because they'll be so confused that they think it's like fall or something. And they'll all of a sudden go to seed, and farmers are like losing their whole crop of cilantro, and they're venting about it. Like, they sprayed, the sky went white, the light was white for a couple of days, my plants reacted, right? Farmers in Maui were having the fallout from the chemtrails because there's a lot of storm systems over there, and they spray a lot to divert and whatever, and mess with the trade winds or whatever it was. But in the 90s, these Maui farmers did a small documentary talking about the fallout from the spray was impacting their thin-skinned papayas and other plants like tomatoes. And these things were dying on the plant. And so they had to put tarps, like clear tarps over them. And some farmers would just tarp it when the chemtrail sprayed. Some farmers would leave them under a roof, but they're fine because they weren't getting the direct fallout. So that's a whole thing. But the UV shift, like the ultraviolet light that we get, our skin has a whole system that absorbs light in it. It's like connected to our endocrine system, which is our hormones. It's connected to our circadian rhythm, which is our biological clock. Like, our body knows exactly what time of day it is all day long. And different things are created in our bodies different times of day. In the middle of the night, we create dopamine and serotonin, melatonin, dopamine precursors, and cortisol levels and all these sort of things. It's all on this clock, which makes it really important to learn about blue light. Maybe get yourself blue light glasses, blue light blocking on your phone, because at night, you don't want to be in front of a screen that's blasting blue light, because your body gets confused thinking that blue light, because on the color spectrum, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, blue, green, blue, indigo, violet, blue light is close to violet, which is ultraviolet, which is UV, which is the sunlight that we absorb and is good for us, and, you know, vitamin D and all that sort of stuff. So blue light is confusing to our pineal gland in our skin, in our endocrine system, and we think that it's like bright sunlight, like it's noon. So we recalibrate our clocks whenever we're in front of bright blue light. So when it's 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., midnight, and you're getting on your phone or your computer or your TV or whatever that's emitting blue light, or even LED light bulbs, it's important to understand that you don't want to go right to bed afterwards because your rhythm is thrown off. Your body thinks it's the middle of the day and all this sort of stuff. So we're very sensitive beings of rhythm and frequency, and we absorb light. We're very absorptive of light. And so when they spray in front of the sun and disrupt the sun's light, the UV can do some real harm. It can there's like UVA, UVB, UVC, and the good UVs get blocked. The bad UVs seem to really be potent when they spray, and it's impacting. I've seen plants get like these burns on them, like sensitive plants just look like they're burned. Treetops of the conifers out here look like they got fried. Like looks like, you know, if you put a magnifying glass and you can like literally focus that light and burn an ant or whatever with a magnifying glass under the direct sun. It's when they spray the haze, sometimes it feels like the sun is under some weird magnifying glass, and the tips of these pine trees look like it, like they're burned on the top. It's wild. And then I mean, we're having like massive tree die-offs over here, and the Doug firs are all up for extinction, and people are all worried and all these things. And it's what's going on is this multi-pronged attack. The UVs are shifting, and the trees are absorbing this different UV, which is messing them up and getting them, like, some of them are dying. Some of them look like they were like this, the edges of the pine needles are like singed kind of like, but not the rest of the tree. So you've got that, but then also you've got the aluminum falling on the trees, which makes them unable to absorb the water. And then the aluminum, it restricts uptake of water, aluminum does, and it makes us humans really dehydrated too as well, which I like. If you've got deodorant, don't get the deodorant with aluminum, it's bad. So also it gets in the soil and it alkalizes the soil. So pH is really important. Humans run at like 7.8 pH. It's important to learn about pH. If you got like heartburn, you can alkalize with like baking soda, a little bit of baking soda and water, but don't do Arm & Hammer. It's toxic. It's like made in a lab. Let's get the other stuff. Important to do your research on almost everything. It's crazy. But understanding pH is important because there's pH of soil, pH of water, pH of us, you know, and if you keep eating not alkaline but acidic stuff, it can be problematic. That's why, you know, vegetables and fruit and vegetables are good for you and stuff like that. But the pH of the soil is wrecked by the aluminum. And so then the natural biomes and the good bacteria, they can't thrive. And then that messes with the water uptake as well. And all the aluminum in the trees ruins their immune systems. So they're not able to fight off these beetles and stuff like they used to. And so then you've got these beetles coming in and causing these big tree die-offs, which I drove through Wyoming like 10 years ago, and I saw these tree die-offs, and they're like, yeah, the beetles are finally invading from Canada, which they never could before. So the trees are all weakened, but we don't know why. Putting two and two together, I'm like, dude, I know why now. Like it's not global warming. It's not global warming making these trees weak, you know? So that's a whole thing. And then the trees become more susceptible. And then you can precipitate lightning with these patents. They can make lightning storms. We just had this storm roll through that had 24 hours. There were like, 60,000 lightning strikes or something in 24 hours. You probably witnessed it. It was the other weekend. And a lot of people said it was highly abnormal, whatever. And when you realize that there's patents for this stuff,
very abnormal. That's someone who's lived here my whole life.
Thank you. And a lot of people were questioning it, and they're like, I never heard thunder like that. I never seen lightning like that and all this sort of stuff. So they are sharpening their tools to be able to precipitate lightning, to be able to cause forest fires in these conditions that are abnormal. And then to really add insult to injury, the technology that they use to create the problem, they could use that technology to put these fires out, you know, make it rain, boom. But instead, what do? They make wind. So it's just like they make high winds over these fires, make them hard to handle. The fires get all big. They can't, you know, the firefighters can't deal. They got to like do these big perimeters. The fires get all big, and then they make national news. And then what does the news say? It's your fault for, you know, living in the system that we created for you. Yeah, it's like, dude, they handed you the system, and then all you did is like try to thrive in it, you know, like you end up buying your car. Like it's like even car ownership for some people is a difficult task. It's like not owning a car is a very hard thing because you got to get a job, and it's like, well, how are you going to get to the job? It's like they make it really difficult on you. And then you finally come up and get your car, and now they're guilting you for owning it. It's like, come on, man. It's like the system. It's like the system. So yeah, it's like, it's something else. It's really something else. And to go deep into it and really like Greta, come to find out Greta is like part of the whole family of all these, you know, scumbags. And she was nominated because she's like a little autistic, and then you can't talk bad about someone that's autistic. That's the whole thing. And so not to be that guy, but she was cherry picked to read her speeches that she did not write, you know, to get to the youth, because this is an attack on the next generation. They want the next generation buying this whole scam, hook, line, and sinker, because 15-minute cities revolve around everyone buying the lie that them moving around too much is adding to the problem. And if they just stay in their tight little place, that the world will be okay. You know what I mean? but it's like there's so many issues with what they are saying. Like it's really just a bunch of lies trying to give the rich the ability to do whatever they want, still continue to, and then for them to be able to herd us like cattle. And I mean, all this sounds really like the why makes people, it turns people away, right? It's like, how about this? Bill Gates is the largest farm owner now in the United States, and weather can be traded as a commodity on the stock market now, right? So if you can control the weather and know who's doing what, you could drought out a farm and then buy it for pennies of the dollar, and it's all really greed. So I know you all Bitcoiners can grasp that there are people that pull strings that could be greedy and want to like control different markets, such as agriculture and transportation, all these sort of things. And that's really what's going on here, you know? And then a lot of people are invested in Bitcoin because they know that the dollar's probably going to crash and go digital and a lot of things. And there is some writing on the wall there. And the whole dollar crash is predestined and planned, and it's all got in a, it's been planned for some time to create some problem reaction solution scenario yet again, where we likely all end up with QR codes that have our medical records attached to them and a social credit system.
CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, is a big one that we talk about. Mm-hmm.
With social credit attached to it, which is not cool. You know, I mean, in China, they've rolled it out and they monitor everything in their technocracy. And I've read articles about it where the AI in China decides, and this woman got turned off of society. She couldn't access her money or banks, her transport, the grocery stores, or anything. She had to keep fighting it tooth and nail for years. And finally they gave it back, and they said the reason why she got turned off is because her deceased dad was a thief. It's like, okay. They also will like monitor you to the point where if you're like, oh shit, I forgot to take my birth control, your social credit score goes down. Bing! Demoted 5 points for not taking your birth control today. It's like, come on, that's not the world that we want to live in, right? They'll probably pull it off in Canada. They're not going to pull it off here. And we are the last line of defense because it's obvious. They're building the infrastructure in Europe. They're doing it in the UK. They're doing it in Canada. They know that we're not going to buy it. So probably they're going to go for our guns first or something. I don't know what conspiracy is next. It's like this election. We got to deal with this nonsense. It's like we are the ones to say no to this and to wake up. So think local and act local. And if we set up something for the next generation, they won't have to just get in line for the slavery. They'll actually have I want to set up a new school in my area that's not just like the public schools. There's a lot of things that I aspire to do because I'm not sure, we had these lockdowns before. I'm not sure they won't happen again. If they happen again, I want to have something set up for people kind of thing. So that's how many conspiracies can we cover? But, you know, the truth is all encompassing. I had a friend, it's kind of a mentor. He would say, you can't be half pregnant. You can't be half pregnant with the truth either. It's like either you're on with it or you're not. It's not like you can just cherry pick and be like, fluoride is bad, but chemtrails are good, you know?
Matt, I have a whole novel of notes here on the side of my screen of things I want to go to, but we just crossed over the 2-hour mark. I think that would be a good place to end it for now. And we've given people plenty of things to chew on, things to look into, and new rabbit holes to dive into, which I think is the most important thing and why I love podcasting so much, because it just gives people new avenues to explore themselves and do all of their own research and find out if we're both just crazy lunatics. That's up to them. I'd fully encourage it. So where can people go to find you, and what other links do you want to send people to continue learning more about this before we do our inevitable sequel? Because we have to do another one later.
I would love to talk more with you. Just let me know, and that would be great. And, you know, any question you come up with, I'd love to answer it. So just, you know, fire them off and write them down, and, you know, anything. I like to talk about spiritual things, and I'm a film major, so I'm really into the esoteric Hollywood and the programming through the movies. And oh my gosh, if you haven't seen the movie Snowpiercer, you got to watch the first 5 minutes of Snowpiercer. It's a Hollywood movie, and it starts off with chemtrail planes gridding the sky, and then it says global warming got out of hand, so we had to dim the sky, but we did it too much, and now we're in an ice age. Whoopsies! And it's like, you know, like Hollywood's definitely behind it all, and that's very fascinating, interesting, and all of it. So yeah, please find me. My name is Matt Landman. I'm on Facebook. I just got pulled from a lot of things. I lost my Instagram, my TikTok, but my company, Sparrow Gear, which I have an EMF silver clothing line, SPERO gear.com. Please check that out. Check out the Instagram for Sparrow Gear, Sparrow Gear. And Sparrow is a Latin word. It means hope. So I'm trying to bring hope through education, awareness, and protection to the next generation regarding the radiation we're being bombarded with through 5G and all that sort of stuff, because this is all very new, and these cell towers being put up next to schools and all this sort of stuff. So we need to educate ourselves on what it means, what ionizing and non-ionizing radiation mean, and how that impacts us. And that's a whole nother talk. And that's a whole another hat I wear. I could do a whole show on EMF radiation, you know, because as an activist, you have to wear many hats. But please find me at actualactivists.com, frankenskies.com. There's also frankenskiesthemovie.com. It's very similar. Please share Frankenskies around. On frankenskies.com, you'll see it's translated in about 8, maybe 10 languages now. Very proud of the different presentations that I've done on the topic, discussing the whole story, you know, of how we got to where we're at. And then, yeah, please find me elsewhere on the internet.
Amazing.
I do like, I get around. So like, you know, if you ever listen to other things, I try to, and if you want me to go on other podcasts, please recommend me, because I'd like to go on podcasts and stuff.
I definitely will. And I know some people that'd be very interested, specifically from Bitcoin world. This is something that's starting to pop up in that community more and more. So I'm definitely going to show you around. And I lied about shutting up. I'm going to throw one more thing at you, because you said that people are always sending you things. So I'm going to send you a thing. It's something called Nostr. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, NOSTR, but this is, I mean, the fact that your basically final social media standing is Facebook is just terrifying to me. I do not want you to lose that. And that's like the most sketchy one of all almost. This is a decentralized social media protocol that runs on like a decentralized network of servers. So it's completely ban proof. You cannot be banned from it. You can run your own server and like have your own account on it. It's super interesting. I'm going to shoot you a podcast I did with a guy who really explains it super well. I think that would be so good for you, because, I mean, obviously talking about this stuff puts a target on your back, and I've been really pushing this stuff out. And, you know, as soon as I put this out, I'm going to be at a new level of just censorship risk, and I'm ready for it. I mean, we need people to break the door down, but having Nostr makes me feel much better, because I can't be censored on there. There's zero algorithm. It's algorithmless. So
cool.
Super interesting. I'm going to throw that your way. But Matt Landman, thank you so much for joining me today, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's so cool. Like this is the type of interview that makes me so thankful for what I do. Just watching your movie and your presentations, which I'll also include in show notes, really just got me thinking in a lot of new ways. And it's just a huge honor to have you on today. So thank you for doing it again, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate you. And I just want to, add one more thing. You just talked about censorship, and I had on TikTok, not from me, but from other people, there was a hashtag FRANKENSKIES with 350,000 hashtags. And then hashtag FRANKENSKIES the movie had almost 200,000 hashtags. And I came on TikTok and I was like, whoa, people have been talking about my movie on here. That's amazing. I was so stoked. And I took a screenshot. Now there's been like a revamp on TikTok. I don't know if they're becoming more westernized or something. I don't know what exactly happened, but FRANKENSKIES now has 29 hashtags, and FRANKENSKIES the movie has like 9 or something. Like they literally took all of them away. I've got screenshots of both. I talked about it on my social media. I'm also on BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, Telegram. Those aren't my big accounts though. And then lastly, please, I'm happy to dialogue with anybody. So email me at FRANKENSKIES, FrankEnSkies @gmail.com. So thanks so much. And you're the man for having me on and for talking about this and for, having an open mind. And I love everything you said. And I want to get the soundbite from you at the very beginning of the show. You said this awesome thing that was the time that it takes for me to open my eyes to newer things is becoming less and less. However you phrased it, I was like, oh, that's money. And I wrote down the timestamp, so I'm going to steal it. Thank you.
I love it. Yes. I can't wait for more chatting with you, man. I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much again.